Are you willing to go of disappointment and reshape your expectations for expectancy? Because God is present. He is involved. The story may not be over yet, so you may not see what the good is, but have faith in the process that it will come to light and you will see it for what it is. You know?
Welcome to Sacred and Strange.
All right. Well, welcome to Sacred and Strange. I'm joined today with my good friend Dennis, who's hopping on from California. Thanks for giving us your time. I've known Dennis now for almost 10 years, which is pretty nuts. He's got an incredible story. He's got a crazy testimony, just lots of really cool things and some really hard things that he's walked through. Without further ado, I'm going to let him jump in. So, Dennis, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you come from, something sacred, something strange.
All right. Well, thanks for having me. My name's Dennis. I am 31 years old from Fresno, California. If you ever want a place to vacation, definitely drive through it to get to LA or drive through it to get to where you. I am the youngest of 10 kids. My mom always wanted 10, and well, she had them. My first 5 siblings were from the same dad who passed away. And then my mom had 4 more, another father. And then that kind of ended in a fairly messy, painful divorce. And then my mom had me with my father.
Your mom had you with your father?
Yeah, crazy.
Nuts. That's the strangest thing I've heard so far.
Fun little fact about that. I'm the only Hispanic out of my 10 full siblings. Of the 10, I'm the only Hispanic. So growing up, I was always the brown one in the photos. All my siblings are blonde hair, blue-eyed, burn in the sun. So it's kind of a fun little, family memory.
You can super flex by getting a tan.
Or I could easily just say I'm not part of them if they start getting a little off the rails during family gatherings.
I'm not with them.
I'm not of them. I
didn't know that about you, actually. I didn't know that you have 5 siblings from one relationship with your mom, 4 with another, and that you're kind of essentially an only child in a way, because you're the only one of your parents.
Yeah, the interesting thing is, as a kid, you don't really see what's not normal until you're older to compare with family dynamics, right? So, for one, being the youngest, my oldest sister, and this is kind of like a little funny, is that she's almost 1 year older than my mother-in-law, right? So, my wife is 2 weeks older than my niece. So, growing up in a family dynamic with such an age gap, I kind of did grow up with like a second set of parents, being my oldest brother and my oldest sister. But at the same time, because there's such an age gap, it was really hard to connect relationally with all those siblings. Sure. Only until in my mid-20s, when you kind of start getting your life together and you start understanding how to converse like an adult with adults.
Actually,
I start to learning how to have some more self-control and some proactive thoughts, not wasting my time, other than Siege, of course. Rainbow Six, if you don't know. We'll touch on that later.
We're going to get to the Leroy Jenkins, because that's real for you.
Real. So in that family dynamic, it was kind of like, it really did feel like I was an only child. And then at the same time, once I did become in my mid-20s, even though relationships were close, I still had to kind of process the fact that there are things that you do inherit from your parents that you just can't kind of get away from, like your genetics, right? Or your quirks. And so as you get older, you start noticing that more and more of how much you are like your parents.
Oh, yeah.
And so as I've gotten older, I've seen how the first 5 siblings have this dynamic of like, tribal pack. As all of us 10, we're all siblings. We don't see each other as halves. So we are a family. Like, we will die for each other. No matter how much we hate each other, we still love each other. We may not like each other, but we love each other. But when you get older, you see that the commonality of what you inherit from your parents. Yeah. So I saw a lot with the first 5 and then the other 4. And so for me, it was almost this own navigation of like, okay, I feel like I'm different and I'm an outsider, even though I'm not by them from how they view me. But I do see this dynamic that's hard to get away from, which was kind of an interesting thing to process as I got older, of like, okay, so there are differences within me, but that doesn't make me less of the family, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's, crazy background, crazy siblings. We all love each other. There's no halves. We're all full, but it is a thing to, at least for me, be aware of like, okay, I'm shying away from my family. Well, what's going on right now? If I don't feel connected, I don't feel like I can relate, or am I just insecure? Which most of the time it's just insecurities that you're not processing, unless you talk about someone's unintentionally causing harm. A lot of the times it's insecurity. One of 10.
You're like, your family is like super blended then. Like if there's like blended families and then there's your family, but it sounds like you guys have navigated that, or at least have agreed upon like a certain dynamic that's like, it doesn't matter, we're a unit. So like we may want to kill each other, but no one else can kill. I'm the only one who's allowed to kill you.
Yeah. And we definitely tried to nearly kill each other.
What's the age gap between you and your closest sibling?
That would be 4 years. So nothing direct. And then the second closest would be 6, if I'm not mistaken. There's a lot of age gaps to remember. That's as much as I know, other than my oldest sister is 20 years older. And then I look back at those numbers. All the other age gaps, birth years, birthdays, my phone will alert me, if not Facebook.
Were you guys all in the same house growing up, or were you like kind of split up and then you were together for a few days a week? Or
we were all in the same house. My mom was always the full custody, because when the first father passed away, obviously you can't share custody with. And then when the second father stepped in, he did some things that was pretty inappropriate. He was molesting children in the church.
Oh, wow.
And one of my sisters as well. So contact, separation. And so we always grew up with my mom. And then my father, he got into drugs and alcohol when I was really young. So he lost custody. And so all of us were always under my mom's protection, right? And, despite, which we can get into later, despite her shortcomings, she always did the best she could to keep us together and to raise us in the church.
Yeah.
Right. So for us, growing up in the Bay Area with its own dynamic of California, Hayward, California, and then also being really poor, like my oldest siblings would sometimes not eat certain days. And so they would learn to basically get extra food from the school or do homework for their friends for food for the weekend sometimes.
Oh, wow.
Right. So, we would live off government assisted food. So growing up in that poverty mindset, you really kind of unintentionally learn the value of relationships and how much more important it is to have that in your life than anything else. Yeah. So instead of having this, self-made success mentality, we grew up in a survival mentality of we all have to stick together or we'll suffer alone. So I think that was the best situation for us growing up, because we learned to kind of just live for each other so that we don't have to worry as much about ourselves. If we all help each other, we're all going to be okay with a little less effort for ourselves working alone. So that's kind of how that pack mentality of we're not halves, we're all full, we're all siblings is kind of like that foundation, which again was really, I think, crucial and valuable for me growing up and having to unpack that. Oh, I have these things from my father that I'm learning that my siblings don't have because they have that from their father. That makes me different, makes them more unified, but we're all still fully unified together. It's kind of this weird dynamic, but I think growing up the way we did set a foundation for us to not deviate from each other despite growing out of our childhood.
Yeah. Well, you guys, it sounds like really went through like, almost sounds like warfare together. Like you were in the trenches together, and that really, when you look at soldiers, it doesn't matter what your background is, where you came from. When you're the guy next to me in the foxhole, it doesn't matter. We're family now.
Yeah, 100%. Like it's incredible, I think, seeing where my family's come from, all of us, and to see how we are now versus how we started, because not many people, I think, can kind of take claim to that with the circumstances they grew up in, right? So, I mean, when it came to school clothes, we had a family friend that she was big on eBay when it first came out, right? Like she would just buy bags and bags of clothes and resell. Like that was her full-time job, just eBay.
Around like 2002.
Oh yeah. She was always like, she had two
Somewhere I've
rooms.
got Beanie Babies, man. Somewhere, this is full confession. I've got bags and bags of Beanie Babies just waiting for eBay to hit its peak again. The new Bitcoin is the Thai coin. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but you said eBay, and I went right to, oh man, I got those Beanie Babies sitting at my parents'.
I remember when McDonald's was giving out Beanie Babies and their Happy Meals.
Oh yeah,
Like it was
some of those too.
so this family friend had two rooms pretty much full of eBay stuff, right? Like she was invested. Like she probably owned half the company. But what she would do for us is that every summer and winter, she would kind of just roll up to our house with like 3 or 4 giant, hefty black trash bags full of clothes and would tell us like, hey, pick through it, pick what you want, and you can have these clothes for, the school year. And so, just having that extended community and family kind of pitching in
Yeah.
to help us. And as kids, you don't know that that's not what normally happens.
Yeah,
You're just
yeah.
like, it's how you get new school clothes. We don't always have to go shopping, right? And so,
Yeah.
siblings, they would get hand-me-downs from like, 4, 5, 6 years above them from their older siblings. I was the more fortunate one despite our circumstances, because at least I was getting like somewhat used, eBay, clothes that probably was owned by to the
Yeah, yeah.
sibling.
You got to like judge it, right? Like, Johnny got the shirt with 5 holes. I've got the
Yeah.
one moth hole. I'm doing
Is there,
pretty good.
there a residual stink that just won't come out?
This smells
Are
like
these
ammonia
jeans
to you?
starched? So like that was just kind of like how we grew up. We didn't know it wasn't normal, but we just kind of were grateful and thankful for the little we had, right? Like for snacks, we would take sugar cubes from like the tea container that my mom would use for tea, and we would like snack on, sugar cubes, at the house, bologna
Wow.
sandwiches, lunch, top ramen. If we're really lucky, we'll crack an egg in there,
Oh,
if
wow.
we have, so that was just kind of like how we grew up, looking
Yeah.
back now, it's like, man, you kind of do have to grieve that process. But at the same time, you can also be grateful and thankful that you still made it through it and you're well, right? Like I am grateful for the way I grew up because it gave perspective. And it's the same with kind of what I went through with, going through cancer twice as a kid, which we can touch on, is that you learn to be grateful for the hardships because it gives you perspective of what's actually valuable. And
Yeah.
so for our family, we learn that we are a unit. We've seen things together. We've done things to each other. Like when either one of us is in a situation that we can't get out of, or we're needing help and we're absolutely deprived of any sense of like self ability to do anything, like our family's there. We're always there. I've had sisters who've gone through drug relapse and alcohol addiction. And through 10, 15-year process of just being there for each other, like to see the turnaround because people are there, you really are grateful for that experience. And you do kind of
Yeah.
have fun, you kind of have to have fun with the pain of the past in a way, right? Like that kind of dark humor, it kind of disarms the severity of it. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, I know the cancer is a sensitive subject, but at the same time, if I can't laugh about it, if I can't make jokes about it, right, it's all I'm doing is like adding power to it. That's like Harry Potter, right? Like fear of the name gives fear to the thing itself. When Hermione is talking about Voldemort, it's like that is true. Like if you're afraid to touch the subject, then you're giving it more power than it actually should have.
Mm.
And pain and fear is perspective, really. Like, yes, it hurts. Yes, it sucks. But it can be good if you choose to let good happen, or at least have perspective to grow out of it.
Yeah. Well, I think what you're touching on, and it's something that, when I think about you, having known you a little while now and your story and some of the stuff you've navigated, like I've always been amazed at your resilience and how much resilience you walk in and carry, not just through, I know you went through cancer twice and, have gone through stuff with your family and with your mom and losing parents, but even just some of the other stuff that I know you've navigated just recently in disappointment, you do have that humor. And I think that there is a measure of that. That's like what scripture talks about, that peace that surpasses understanding sometimes, or that he makes all things new, turns all things to joy, is like, yeah, sometimes we laughing in the face of our enemy is like, real power. But I think it goes even beyond that for you because what I've known you to walk in through that stuff is you carry a lot of wisdom that actually helps others go through that too. So let's talk about that a little bit. Let's talk about what that was like for you because you were really young when you went through the cancer scares and navigating all that. So what was that like being a kid? What was that like when you look back at it now?
Yeah. So I guess to walk through it through a quick history is that I was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma, which is a cancer of the lymph nodes when I was 6 years old. I was born in 94, diagnosed in 2000. And so I was really young when that first happened. And so a lot of like the memories of it was just the being naive as a child, right? Like you don't really understand what's going on. You're kind of just going through it. You don't really have choices. So you're kind of just reacting to your environment, right? So I don't really have a whole lot of memory from that particularly. But when I was in seventh grade, there were some things that kind of popped up in my blood test that caused concerns. And then over some more extensive testing, they found out that I actually had my cancer came back, which is usually pretty rare. I was in remission for several years. And so for the cancer to come back was kind of an anomaly for the doctors. And so that was something that they were pretty quick to start game planning for. And I was like 13 at this point when I was officially diagnosed. So that process was pretty interesting because, you go through the chemotherapy, right? Which I was doing in between my school year. So I would, probably take like a lunch every Thursday and I would go in for, my chemo and then I would go back to school Friday. So I would try to keep it under the radar. You don't want to talk about it because you're embarrassed or ashamed. All those mixed emotions with,
Kids are the worst, man.
Yeah.
Find that stuff out and
Yeah.
I mean, I totally understand that.
Luckily, I grew up in a school that didn't have a lot of bullying, which is kind of rare because I didn't see that growing up.
Millennial?
Well, maybe I was in a different crowd. Maybe my skater emo hair just kind of blurred out everything I was seeing.
It was the early signs of woke California, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. I was a full skateboarding, long black hair. I would straighten it because it got curly, just to really kind of into that to my Chemical Romance vibes.
You tell your mom it wasn't a phase.
Yeah, no, it's not a phase. I still have it. It's just started just for the podcast. When it happened the second time, I didn't even tell my friends what was going on because you just don't know how to talk about it. You don't know how to feel about it. I remember at the time that I was told that my cancer came back. My mom always did the best, but she had some poor executions. Her way of telling me as a 13-year-old was for me to come home from school one day and to have my sister and my two siblings that were living at the house at the time all on the couch. I'd have my stepdad there. And then I had the pastor and the pastor's wife, who I didn't know because my parents were going to a new church at the time, also in the house, almost like some kind of like a intervention.
I'm on you.
Sometimes it kind of felt that way. So, if she sat me down on the couch and said, we have some news for you, kind of told me, as a kid, you're like, I just want to be alone. I don't want to be the spectacle, painful news. And so, the pastors do their thing and they pray and they leave. And then I pull off that classic, they'll never know what I'm really going to do, but I'm going to go take a shower at, 7:30 p.m. So I was in the shower and had time alone to process. And by process, I mean, you just kind of cry it out, right? Because there's nothing else you can do. I remember at this time when I was kind of like praying to God, which I never really did growing up. We grew up in the church, but it was more of like a lifestyle rather than a relationship. I wasn't at that part of my relationship and walk with God to understand that there's a person behind the religion. It was more of like, you do good, be good, and say Jesus is your savior and you'll get to heaven, right? The EBCs. I remember I was in the shower and I was crying. I was praying and I had this aggressive, what I called an ultimatum with God. At the time, my sister was pretty separated from the family, from some other family drama. And we had no idea where she was. And it's been several years. And she had my niece and nephew. This was before Facebook and MySpace and AOL.
Is your oldest sister?
One of the middle sisters.
Okay.
I could go down the list, but, I don't know if that would be any more help. Just add more confusion. It was one of the middle sisters. She separated from the family for justifiable reasons from her perspective. So probably 4 or 5 years into like having no connection. And again, before the internet had like MySpace and, smartphones and GPS, like you basically had a Garmin to navigate, when you're going from city to city. It's all paper maps, right?
Yeah.
So when someone disappears, good luck. Change the phone number, don't register in the phone book, you'll never find them again. So I remember praying to God as this like ultimatum. I said, I will go through this and I will do it without complaint and I will do it without anger and bitterness if you bring my sister back into the picture. Right. And so as a 13-year-old, I just wanted my family together. And as time went on, I went through the chemo, the doctors basically got back to me and were like, hey, apparently you became immune to chemo from the first time when you were 6.
I didn't know.
Doctors were kind of stumped and dumbfounded. They're like, the chemo didn't do anything to the cancer. So the only explanation is that you got immune to it from when you were a kid. And that's a kind of crazy thing to hear, is that the human body can get immune to poison that is meant to kill you. So the next step is, well, there's an experimental chemotherapy trial we can put you through. You can be one of the guinea pigs, basically. And the chemo the first time around wasn't so bad. Like you get a little nauseated, but I was able to kind of get through it. Hair wasn't quite falling out yet. And this was around the end of the school year. And so I started going through the intense chemotherapy stages, which I had to do it 6 times or 8 times. And this was crazy. I would go in on a Monday and they would hook you up through the IV and give you the chemo. And then I would basically lose consciousness until about Friday because it was so intense that my body was in survival mode. And so they have you hooked up to heparin, which is kind of like a saline solution, and, keep your electrolytes up. So I would wake up about Friday having not eaten or physically drinking anything for about 5
Like in the hospital while this is happening? Like you're in the hospital from Monday to Friday?
Just in there. And then I couldn't be released until I would show that I could keep down a certain volume of liquids and food. So I would wake up about Friday throwing up because you're so sick. And good luck throwing up anything you haven't had in your system for 5 days. So it's literally just stomach acid. It's brutal. And so I would finally be released very late Sunday or Monday. And then I would have to do it every 2 weeks. So by the time I get home Monday, basically recovering just to do it again. So even though it's a 2-week interval, it's really kind of like a 5-day rest period. Yeah. So that was the second stage of intense chemotherapy. And then from there, I had to do a bone marrow transplant, which science is so crazy. They were able to use my own bone marrow without even having to stick me with a needle. So when a lot of cancer patients get what they call a Broviac catheter, which is kind of like this rubber lining that connects to one of your arteries. And mine was installed in my chest. And the intent of this is to avoid getting probed with needles all the time. And so one is to draw blood and the other one is to insert like any IV fluids or liquids. And so through the Broviac catheter, they were able to extract some of my own bone marrow. And so what they did is they took the bone marrow and they froze it. And then when I went through the bone marrow transplant, they used my own healthy cells in my own bone marrow to reinstall into my body. So my body would be producing healthy cells again.
3 foot by 3 foot.
So with the bone marrow transplant, before they put the cells back in my body, they basically give me this poison that basically wipes out your entire immune system because they're trying to reset your body. And so I went in for that, and your cell counts are basically 0, right? And then they put my bone marrow cells back into me, so my body starts producing purely healthy cells. So my body's not in a constant like fight against like the cancer. And so because my cells were so low, I was in that room for like 60, 75 days straight, pretty much couldn't leave it, right? And so that was the second stage. And then the third step was how to do radiation therapy. So once my cells were healthy enough that I could be off-site to like a Ronald McDonald house, which is kind of like this halfway home for kids that are constantly in hospital but are far away from home. I was at Lucile Packard, which is Stanford's hospital's children's hospital, right? So Stanford Hospital, Palo Alto. Lucile Packard is the children's section of that hospital. I was there for since came in around like July or August, and I left October 31st, so a few months. And so the radiation,
What a day to leave.
yeah,
What a day to leave on Halloween.
literally, yeah, I remember leaving that day too. First thing I did was I got pizza on the way home. When you're going through this whole chemo thing, like you can't touch food that's like made outside of your own home. Like you can't touch anything. No fast food, restaurants, because any cross contamination, any chance of getting sick, it's pretty much a death sentence. So I remember getting pizza for the first time in like a year. And that was like, talk about a miracle meal. All that pepperoni cheese wasn't no New York, but it did its job. So the radiation process was like every 2 or 3 days for about, I don't know, 30 days to 60 days. So it was like on and off. And so the interesting thing about this whole process was when I was finally going through my radiation therapy, this is probably maybe 2, 3 months into, the bone marrow transplant into radiation. Word got out to my sister in Arizona, the one that's been separated for years, that, hey, your youngest brother is going through cancer. So you should probably check in to see what's going on. So she had no idea what was happening, right? So the whole thing started in January, all the way up through, this was about September when word got out to her. And so it was at that time that she started making amends with my mom, with my sister, which that relationship was kind of the tension that caused her to separate. And she immediately took a trip to California to see me and my mom. And she brought, my niece and nephew, her 2 kids, with her. And that was like the starting point of mending bridges that she burned and siblings burned with her separation. And looking at it now in hindsight, I feel like God 100% answered that prayer and kind of used me to reconcile family. And had I not gone through cancer the first time, to become immune to chemo, to be required to go through an experimental trial through Stanford's hospital, and have to go through a bone marrow transplant and through the radiation therapy, my sister would have not really been informed of what I was going through in the process of me going through it, which I think has more weight than her learning about it after the whole thing was start to finish. For all she knew, like I could be dying, I could not be having successful experiences in the hospital, and going through hardship together as a family is a whole different relational build than part of it when the process is over. And that's the thing with psychology, is when you let people into your process, you build relationship. So you don't give them influence over your decision making. Getting them involved in your process builds relationship. And I 100% know that God used my cancer experience to build the family back together and answered my prayer, and the thing is, I didn't even remember having that prayer until like probably weeks after my sister was brought back into the picture. In a moment of intense emotional pain, I thought I had, the leverage to deal with God in an ultimatum, which, God's probably laughing to begin with, of like, oh, that's so funny because, in my faith, I do feel like we can sway God in some way, like the way that I believe it was Abraham. Was it Abraham? And Moses swayed God by extending grace and mercy.
Yeah.
I feel like God was able to use my situation and do more with it because I was able to partner with the better things, right? Like, what is the kingdom of heaven and what is God after? It's reconciliation and it's family, right? And despite what can happen in the natural without anyone to blame, right? It's not God who's to be blamed for my cancer, but I was able to partner with him and contest for something even greater, which was the kingdom coming in my family, and I look at that and I'm beyond grateful for what I went through. It gave me perspective throughout my entire upbringing of like, well, what's important, what's valuable. At the end of the day, no matter how bad things are, could be worse, and I was fortunate that my situation could have been worse. I saw kids my age and younger not make it with the same diagnosis.
Wow.
In the hospital, I was taking 4 pills a day. And I'll be honest, sometimes I didn't take them. I kind of faked it and I threw them away.
Leroy started
That's when the literal thing started. It told me what to do. Right? Like there, there was a kid my age that he had to take about 20 to 22 pills a day in the hospital. And he was released to go home. He still had to take about 12. And he didn't even make it. He passed away a couple months after. And
Wow.
I was fortunate to only have to take 4. And then when I went home, I only had to take 2 for a short time. And, I can't answer the questions for why. All I can do, which is my responsibility, is to find God in my story so that I can
Mhm.
then at least give people the perspective and direction to find him in theirs. Which I think for me, and this is kind of going off subject of my story, but I think a lot of problems with today's culture is people are always shouting, like, well, where is God when these things happen? And it's
Yeah.
like, can you find God in your own story? Because you've been in it 24/7. You have arrogance to believe that you can question that in any other story, right?
Yeah.
Because people that perspective, like, well, how can God exist if you got cancer twice? And it's like, well, let me sit you down and talk to you about what I went through, because your arrogance to assume that you know more than me in my own story, God was present the whole time.
Yeah.
God
Even
restored.
even the arrogance to think like that you can blame God for that. That you can say, well, that I can define his character based on my personal experience. And it's like, I guess there's a measure of understanding him based on your experience, but at the same time, if you don't have the framework for like, you're talking about God
Mhm.
and you want to say, you know, you went through a bummer situation, so that must define who he is, right?
Yeah.
And it's one of the profound promises of the gospel is to say, sometimes life sucks, but you get the promise of a savior who walks with you. Sucks, you know?
And I think also to kind of reshape the word choice, it's like anger, right? Like anger is the surface level and arrogance of judgment's the surface level. But if you really kind of peel back those layers, it's really just pain because
Yeah.
they found him in their story, right?
Yeah.
Like I could look at my past and remove God from it, and I'd be very angry, very bitter, and very upset, and very self victimizing of woe is me, this sucks, this isn't how it was supposed to go. But if I remove that arrogance of judgment and I look at the pain for what it is and recognize that I need help out of it because I'm
Mm.
stuck and I'm spiraling, like finding someone who can walk you through your own pain to process it, I think is really what the key thing is. And a lot of people are afraid to look at their own pain because it's crushing. It is soul crushing. Like you will die having to go through the pain of the past to walk forward in the future that you don't know how that's going to go because you're no longer
Yeah.
stuck in it that you've lived in because the pain protected you from more pain by staying in pain. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, we create the survival systems, right? Where it's like either my pain makes me want to avoid more pain, or I let my pain define who I am in a way that's not healthy, right? I'm going to become a total chad to protect myself, or, whatever. I'm going to become alpha because I'm never going to let this pain come near me again. And it's like, actually, the profound thing is when we lean into pain and we pass it through, for us, we pass it through the lens of Jesus. We say, oh, wow, you're actually doing something with my pain that I can't do on my own.
Yeah.
When it becomes a sacred space, like that season that you walk through cancer, I'm listening to your story and I have some questions about your sister. I'm looking at that, and what you're talking about is that was actually the Lord turned that into a sacred season.
Mhm. Yeah.
And he's the only one who can take a 13-year-old boy with and say, I'm going to make this season sacred because you chose in that shower to submit it to me.
Mhm.
You know, that's profound.
Then the funny thing too is that looking at that moment, you completely, at least for me, like I forgot I had that prayer, and I wasn't holding God to it. It was just out of pain I prayed for it, and yet
Mm.
God still answered regardless of my commitment. And you know, I wasn't angry and I wasn't bitter and I wasn't kind of kicking back, because in that shower, it was defeat. The situation is what it is. I can't pray it away, right? And so all I have to do is go forward, because there's no other option, right? Even as a 13-year-old, I understood, like, there's no praying this away. And that's not to say that there isn't healing and there's not spiritual miracles that happen. And I do fully believe in that. But at the time and the way I grew up, that wasn't a culture to have faith for. And so it really was like, you know, up a creek
You,
without a
you
paddle.
basically walked into the mortuary too. Like when you came home from school, it was like
Yeah.
everyone's here. Is it?
Yeah.
Am I
Like,
saying my goodbyes?
they basically already like punched my ticket. You know? So in a way, it was just defeat. Like, there's nothing I can do except accept reality for what it is. And this is at the time in a faith that I had, that there was no miraculous turnarounds. But at the same time, I look at it and I was like, no, it was miraculous because God was involved. And,
Mm,
you know, going in the ministry school that I went to in my 20s, I think a lot of people were disconnected from seeing miracles happening with instant genie in a bottle. It happened and it's gone, right? Like, that's a miracle. But for me, in my situation, like, the miracle was my family got restored, and God used a process for it to happen.
yeah.
And I think with how I saw my situation is that miracles are simply God being involved. That's it.
Mm,
And it doesn't matter what the outcome looks like. It's the process of God being present. So for me, like, it was a miracle that I went through cancer, I went through chemo, advanced chemo, bone marrow, radiation, all for my family to be restored. And that's a
mm,
much better outcome than me just having my cancer go away and my sister be disconnected from her siblings, which I don't know how that story would have turned out.
yeah.
And I wouldn't want to know, because at the end of the day, it's relationship and it's restoration of community, which from the beginning is the whole content of the Bible. It's
Yeah.
relationship. And I think that's always the greater miracle than just praying away pain, because you can
Yeah.
use pain to help other people, right? Like, I learned through my cancer, I have every right to kind of shame and blame people that say, oh, I'm too sick, I'm not feeling well, I'm calling off
Oh, yeah.
work.
You have the ultimate gatekeeper key.
I have a cancer card in my wallet, for Pete's sake.
There's like that's like a woman who's had kids. I survived cancer. Like those are the
Yep.
two get out of jail free cards.
No matter what the argument is, just say, like, well, I had cancer, right? It's like, I win. Doesn't matter. The argument's over.
We're not even fighting.
I don't even know where I was going prior to this, but yeah, it's the
Well,
ultimate.
yeah, and I think what you're touching on, you know, is kind of the thing that I think we're seeing even church trend kind of start to ask questions about, especially in the charismatic circles of like, because we both went to the same ministry school. And there was sort of this push of like, it is only good all the time, you know, and understand there's some nuance to that perspective there, but there was kind of, and I think you could almost, at risk of making a blanket statement, almost say this is the majority of charismatic Christians kind of flow in this, like, cancer-free zones, and it's only ever good, and the Lord only has good. And it's like, yeah, that's true. We also have to understand in that of like, there are times where the Lord does break in and heal. And there are also times where he's actually doing a deeper work. And it's not that one is greater or lesser than the other. It's all us learning to lean into, what are you doing, Lord? Like, how are you going to have your way with this? And for, again, for a 13-year-old kid to have the perspective of like, the reward I want for this is my family brought back together. You probably could ask for anything at that point. What are you going to, like, I want a PlayStation 3, Mom. Yeah, okay. We're going to make that happen. But
You
to
would
say,
think
I
so.
want my family, that's crazy.
You'd think so, but Make-A-Wish only gives it to you once, I found out. I had that. I was like, hey, Doc, listen, first time I had a Make-A-Wish and I chose a Toys R Us shopping spree. Do I get another one? They're like, no, you only get one Make-A-Wish for your life. And I was like, you kidding me?
Oh,
So
would you have rather gotten the Make-A-Wish at 6 or gotten it at 13?
You know what? That's tough. No, I still 6 because the Toys R Us shopping spree was how I got an Xbox, right?
No.
All the things that probably broke over time, the Xbox, Halo 1,
Yeah,
and
man.
as anybody
You were,
remembers that?
you
And
were playing Halo Combat Evolved at 6 years old.
well, I had 2 older brothers, and they were the ones that were like, okay, Halo. And I was like, I don't know what that is, but okay, I trust you guys, right? And so, that was like a bonding thing with us. And
That's also the ultimate older brother move. Like, hey, little brother who has cancer and can get whatever you want.
yeah. And I was like, okay, 4 controller. That Xbox, the Xbox One was indestructible. It was the
Oh,
Nokia
yes.
of video game consoles. Like, there was no pulling it over. That's by nuclear fallout. It was the cockroach of consoles.
Yeah.
And at the time I had cancer the second time, my siblings were old enough that they kind of bought me a 360 for Christmas. I was going through cancer. Kind of
And
worked.
then none of them were like, wish for my mortgage to go away.
I should have asked for 2 more things in that shower, thinking about it. Give me enough money to put a down payment for a house so I can survive the house market by the time I'm in my 30s.
My make-a-wish is I want Tom Brady's house.
So,
Please.
so make a wish. You can't ask for homes or vehicles. Because when I was 6, the first thing I asked for was a car because we didn't have one growing up. And they were like, oh, we can't give you a car because you can't drive it.
That's the wrong wish, Dennis.
Yeah.
You can't wish for that.
So they were like, do you want to go anywhere, like a round the world vacation trip for a month? And I was like, no, Toys R Us shopping spree. And they were like, you don't want to go to Hawaii and the Bahamas and here and here? And I was like, nope, Toys R Us shopping spree. And they were so dumbfounded. And it's like, dude, I'm poor. I got no toys and no game consoles. I don't care about Hawaii.
Oh my gosh. That's really funny. It's dark, but it's funny.
Like I said, you gotta have fun with it, like nothing's that serious,
So your sister, did you guys know that she was like, did your mom know she was coming, or she just like showed up with your niece and nephew and were like,
Yeah. So she actually was able to get a hold of the place we were staying at, the Ronald McDonald House by Lucille Packard. She was actually able to call that place and got a hold of my mom, and then they talked through it. She talked to me. And once she had more information, she was able to plan out a date to drive over and come and stay for a few days. So that's kind of the story there on how that unfolded.
going in your mind, like the day she walks in the door of like, 'cause I know you say you didn't remember that prayer until a little while later, but is anything rattling around in the back of your mind of like, this is kind of crazy?
Not at
Like,
the time. It was kind of just like, oh, cool. Like my sister's on the phone. Haven't talked to her in a few years, right? Like I think at the time I was so involved in the day-to-day realities and the schedules and, feeling disconnected from school and my friends. Like they still didn't know what was going on. I just disappeared for 4 months. I wasn't in school till like April because going back home, I still had to stay away from a lot of groups. So like
you,
I was still trying to navigating all of that, like social awkward shame, embarrassment, and kind of feeling like an outsider. So a lot of those kind of things, I think, kind of just mask the reality of being present for that situation with my sister, which if I think it was several years to be specific that it all came full round. I guess we can go into that next, which is like the first time I had an encounter with God.
Yeah.
Like the presence of God. You almost become like the token child of the church when you're this like cancer survivor 2 times. You're kind of like the 2 gold medal winner that the church brags about. It's like, oh, here's, the child of prophecy. And because you're put on a pedestal, you kind of learn to behave and act accordingly, right? Like in the church, my mom was heavily involved. We would show up an hour early every Sunday. We would leave an hour late every Sunday because she would socialize. Same thing on Wednesdays, and then Bible studies on Tuesdays. Luckily, I didn't have to go to Bible studies. So Sunday and Wednesday were like full days at the church. And at this point, I was the only one at home. All my siblings were older now. So I was there all the time. And I remember I started getting into guitar around 15 years old. Word got out to the pastor. And the pastor was like, oh, you're playing guitar. Join the worship team. And I was, as a kid, like you don't say no to the pastor. Like you just don't. So I was like, Okay.
My dad was the pastor, so I said no a lot.
Did it work out for you?
Huh. There's a few months in there I don't remember at all, just
Wow.
like in a coma.
Punishment's that bad, huh? Putting you out in the fields.
It's like that.
But yeah, so I started, really learning guitar, like chord progressions, around like 15 and a half, 16. And I remember having this mindset of, if I'm going to be put to a leadership position, because I do feel like anybody on the worship team is presenting themselves to the church as a certain level of like, just have your together, right? You should be trying to the best of your ability to at least be aware of your faults and work on them, not be ignorant to them. We're all faulty, but just don't be walking around in blatant sin with ignorance to it. The mindset I had as a kid was like, hey, I'm before the church, before all these leaders. I need to start taking this serious because I'm actually representing these people, right?
Mm.
And if I'm expected to lead them, I should at least like show more respect. So I started going to Bible studies. I started sitting in the front row pew. So I started kind of doing all the right things. I remember this one particular Sunday, we were having the worship and it was kind of a little bit more intense than usual. Even as a band, when you can kind of find your groove and kind of fit into the nuance of following and leading each other, and then you add worship on top of that as another complex layer of kind of following the spirit and communicating through music what your spirit's trying to say and letting God have space to work in people. It was pretty intense. It was the first time I experienced that. And, the pastor kind of recognized it and went up to the mic as we were playing and was like, hey, we're going to cancel the message. We're just going to open up the altar and we're just going to let God move. And so I remember being a 16-year-old, seeing the entire congregation reacting and responding to this thick tension in the room that you can't describe anything other than spiritual. And they're all before the steps and they're all crying and praying and they're all, moving. And I'm on the stage. And so I get front row view to this, right? Like you see it. They're coming to you because that's where the altar is. And it was just me, the bass player, the keyboard player, and even the singer was just silent at the time. And it was just the musicians. And as the electric lead guitar, you're kind of leading this. And so I'm kind of watching this happen. And I remember being so humbled by it because I understood at that moment that God was still using me to reach these people when I had no direct relationship with him. And that was kind of shocking because I'm like, God, I don't know you. I don't interact with you. I know what you want and don't want from your book. I know it pretty well. I've grown up in it, but I don't know you. And yet you're still using me to reach these people to a point where they're broken before you at the altar. And I can feel the thick tension of love and broken alabaster jar in the room, but I don't have that. But I see them with that and I want it. Like that was the moment I decided to really follow after God relationally. And there were so many things that were happening within me in my spirit that like I also came to this realization that made me never want to turn away. I really can't turn away is that not only did God pursue me to the point of death through the cross and save my life, but he also was protecting me through both moments I went through cancer. And so in a way, I owe my life to God 3 times over because even though the cross was a moment of opportunity to be forgiven and reconciled, we still walk away from it and we still live a life without it.
Yeah.
Even in not living with him, he still chose to pursue me and protect me and save me through cancer twice and answer my prayers. And people can say, oh, well, you were just a kid. You didn't know any better, yada, yada. But again, like that's not their story. They don't get to have an opinion.
Yeah. And who are they to say that what you experienced is, it doesn't get to pass through their filter?
And so as a 16-year-old, for me to have this awareness that like God has always been pursuing me, even if I showed no interest in it. And to see like what love could do when I'm face to face with it, being a fly on the wall, like it was at that moment I realized God was more than just the set of rules and expectations. He was a person who recklessly cared about people. right? Wanted that. And at the same time, being in this place of leadership, it was this like fire that burned in me to have an even higher expectation for myself, but with the right intention now. It was no longer this do the right things for X, Y, and Z, but I saw the fruits of what happens when I do. And so it was a call to action for me to always try and be a source for God to move in my life for other people to experience God. And that was kind of like what revolutionized my walk with God at 16, 2 years, 3 years after, the whole cancer situation, and seeing God's prayer or my prayer to God answered with my sister. Like 16 was a crazy year for me to kind of have this literally coming to God moment during a full worship set, nonetheless. It's kind of this like, well, I'm stuck in it and I'm having to watch this and I want it. I want this and I will pursue it in my days.
Yeah. Man, it's no wonder, listening through your story, how like seeing your resilience is in direct correlation of like the Lord was so active in your life, even when I think you probably weren't even aware of it yet, and just how he was communicating with you and moving on your heart. And, you know, even from the fact that, while you may not have been super walking in it young, or like your parents were just going because it was what they knew to do, like you know, how we can look at that as being, insignificant, or even like, the word we like to throw around is like, well, you're just being religious. Is like, yeah, but look what the Lord can do with just a little bit of faithfulness. Look what he can do with just even if it's just, it's the whole idea of the seeds that are thrown. It's not your responsibility, right, to see those seeds germinate or know what's going to happen with it. But look at what the Lord can do with just a little bit, just a
Mhm.
little bit. Take a kid who, you know, can experience something that no kid should ever have to experience cancer or go through the treatments or any of that sort of stuff. No one should. That's, you know, it's criminal, really. I mean, there's no other way to say it. I mean, we live in a fallen world and all that stuff, and we get into the theological debates. But at the end of the day, no kid should have to experience that. But look what the Lord can do with a little bit of faithfulness in that situation. Look what the Lord can do with a little bit of submission to him in that situation. I think on a personal basis, that even at the risk of maybe sounding a little selfish, like my grandfather passed away of cancer when I was 10. I watched him walk through that for about 3 years. He had prostate cancer, and he would go into remission for a few months and then come back. And then I watched him over the last like 6 months of his life just deteriorate, just like nothing we could do. And I remember feeling helpless, and I remember being so scared of cancer and the whole idea of facing my body killing itself, my body turning against itself, and that whole thing, and what would that be like, and trying to think through, what would, how was that's gotta feel so scary. But then to hear you, who's walked through and been like, my first thought was like, I'm gonna submit this to the Lord, and I'm gonna get a reward for it. There's gonna be something good that comes from this.
Mhm.
I don't think at 37 now, I don't even know if my brain would go there 15 minutes. I'd probably do the shower thing, but I
Yeah.
don't know that I would in that moment get to a place where it's like, it would probably take me a while longer. And man, I just think of that in your story, and it's like, God is so faithful, and he can do so much with just a little bit of faithfulness. Yeah.
Yeah. I think seeing how much God can work with such little has really shaped, at least for me, how much I try to walk in self-sacrifice and grace and mercy for people. And
Mhm.
I'm not perfect, and there's many times where I get frustrated with people, especially family, where I'm like, oh, gosh, I'm so sick of this. But at the same time, if I see someone just trying to the smallest amount, I'm like, you have all of me for what you need, right? Like, especially seeing my sister going through like drug addiction growing up, like
Mhm.
seeing people that walked away from her, when every time she fell, she still tried to go forward, right, through the relapsing. And I'm like, I remember reading Proverbs when I was in my early 20s because I got so frustrated with her relapsing again. And the family was angry and she was broken. And there's a lot of high emotions. And I remember reading Proverbs, and this is what really broke me on you think you know how to live righteously, but you are a fool. And that was how I read the scripture. And it was one of those like, I'm not using the scripture to justify my frame of living. I'm using the scripture to reframe how I view things. Because
Yeah.
every time I had a thought, I had to gate check it with this scripture. And in Proverbs, it says that, though the righteous fall 7 times, they get back up.
Mm.
But when the wicked fall, they stay down. And I remember reading that scripture unintentionally at the same time that all this was happening with my siblings and my mom. And I saw what righteousness really looked like because here was my sister falling again for the 7th time, trying to get back up. And yet, in that same time, all the siblings were walking away from her. And me being stuck in the middle of tension of like, I love her, I love my siblings. I don't know what the right and what the wrong is. All I know is that there's a lot of pain. And that scripture to me was like, if all was to end today, who stands by righteousness judgment, right? Those who walked away, those who stayed down and left, or the one who's trying to get back up again and go forward, despite what we judge as what's right and wrong and how we live as a person. And I remember that in that scripture, I was like, if I was to judge, which I'm not in the place to, but if I was to judge based on the scripture, she would be more righteous than my siblings because they've walked away and given up. They've surrendered and stayed down, and my sister's trying to move forward. And in the same tension, our stories aren't over till they're over, which means by that scripture, we're all able to be judged as righteous because who knows when someone chooses to move forward and get back up again, right? And I think that's where people really wrestle with like the salvation story of like, well, what if someone's on their deathbed and finally decide to accept Jesus? It's like, well, I'm this person in hell. Isn't that worth celebrating, right? We want to have like our own understanding and grip of reality, and it's like, well, that's God's job, not ours.
Yeah.
Him. And in that passage I saw like, if anybody's able to put a little bit of effort in, then all that's going to compound and snowball towards something beautiful. And first time I had something scripturally that I had to contend with for like a year and a half of like, how am I supposed to judge and view things in my life? Because we all judge, right?
Yeah.
It's hard to do it, but at least have the tools to learn how to do it well. And when you have that as your rubric, it's kind of hard to judge people other than, well, let's hope they get back up again. And if they don't, who knows when they will, because I can't see the future. Let's just have healthy boundaries, if any.
Yeah. I mean, when you look throughout the Gospels or you look through a lot of Paul's epistles, even, there's a constant theme of our job in holy judgment is to try to foster redemption and restoration, right? So it's how do we come alongside broken people as a broken person with the desire to see. Now it's completely their choice if they choose to, stay in whatever they're in or stay toxic or whatever. They're going to be given over to whatever they submit to. But my job as a follower and disciple of Jesus is, how do I bring about an experience or encounter with this person, with the one who wants to rewrite their story, who wants to make all things new and make all things right, And I think we could do a lot with a lot more people looking at other people through that lens in the church. Man, I think there's a whole lot of broken people out there that, part of why we're doing this right now, having this conversation, is you just led us through a whole story of a season where you were broken as a kid and what the Lord again can do with that brokenness. And, I think we need more stories like that out there in the church of like, yeah, the Lord did good things, but I have to remember where he led me out of too at the same time, so that then I can have compassion and I can have empathy. And those two things together those are, look at the Gospels. How many times does it say Jesus performed a miracle? And right before that, it says he was moved in compassion. And then a miracle happens. You know, it's almost every single one talks about a movement of compassion that he felt in his spirit. And then, something divine breaks through. And I think that's a powerful perspective.
Well, it kind of is a bit of like a marriage foundation, right? Of like, my life isn't about me. It's about what I can give and add to my wife. And
Mm,
it's reciprocal. And I think that's why marriage is such a powerful spiritual connecting prelude to our relationship with God, right? Is
mm,
that it's like the testing ground. Can you be fully self-sacrificial for someone else who you're fully committed and bonded to, who you have trust over time in relationship with?
mm.
Even if you're not seeing eye to eye, will you still choose her over you?
Yeah,
And if you can do that, then the next step is to do that with people that you're not married to, but your family with. Like, still love them and sacrifice for them and give to them, even when you don't want to because you're upset,
yeah,
right? Not about you, it's about them. And if you can do that with your close relationships, then you can also test that on strangers, right? Like, it goes back to the scripture of like, you love the ones you love, so what? Love your enemy. How about that?
yeah, yeah,
But can you do it to complete strangers, to your enemies?
yeah,
And I think that's like the testing ground of like, life's not about us, it's about others, right? And
yeah,
my story can help someone else feel a little bit less hopeless and know that it can get better, if you just give God space and also re-question what good is, right? It's the thing with like going to the gym. Like, the gym is not enjoyable by any means. And if you are, you're probably a little masochist.
Like, if people are like, yeah, I love running, you're
You
lying
love,
to me, and more importantly, you're lying to yourself.
you love
It's
when
not
running.
fun.
I love knowing that I did that, but I didn't like doing it.
Yeah, exactly.
So
You're
like,
like, I do things that hurt because it benefits me, not because
yeah,
it's like I like hurting.
good is a perspective shift, right? It's not an experience, it's a result or it's a process. And so if we're looking at things in our life as good because it's enjoyable, it's like, well, guess what? There's a lot of sin out there that I'm pretty sure is enjoyable. That
Yeah,
doesn't mean it's good for you, right? Like, how
yeah,
many narcotics are out there that make you feel good in the
sure.
moment that you're experiencing it? But the end result is death and destruction and separation and loneliness and pain. Like, that's
Yeah,
not good. It's enjoyable, which we can say that, but it's not good. And
yeah,
so, what is good? I think that's like a question more people need to ask themselves in light of scripture than anything else. Is you look at the Gospels, a lot of what they went through wasn't enjoyable by any means.
yeah,
The cross was not enjoyable, but it was good. And I think our story is the same way, is that all the hardships we go through, it's not enjoyable, but it's good if you choose to release the disappointment of expectation and reshape it for expectancy.
yeah,
Expectation is to be X, Y, and Z, and it has a detailed write out of what you are expecting it to be. But expectancy is as simple as, God's involved, it will be good. I just need to learn how to see it that way.
mm,
It's not this false spiritualization of it, which people can go too far with. But if you're walking through it with God and Holy Spirit to navigate the, truth, then expectancy will then give you the good perspective of what it is. And expectations won't result in disappointment because God didn't come through in the way you wanted him to, but God came through. Are you willing
yeah,
to go of disappointment and reshape your expectations for expectancy? Because God is
mm,
present, he is involved. The story may not be over yet, so you may not see what the good is, but have faith in the process that it will come to light and you will see it for what it is. It took me till I was 16 to see what my past was.
yeah.
Claim of it, right?
I like that perspective. I've never actually heard anyone make that distinction between expectation and expectancy. I like that. I'm going to chew on that for a while.
That was one of my first messages I preached to my church growing up. The pastor
Mm,
let me speak a couple times as a teenager, which is kind of weird. I'm like, Okay. All right. It taught me a lot of scriptural studying, like how to do it well. But that was one of the things that I think really helped me in my 20s is understanding expectation versus expectancy. Expectancy is simple. Like God is good, God's involved, it will result in good things. Expectations is defining, and we know we can't define God. And if we try to, good luck. And we can, it's like Proverbs, like we can, dream out our future, but God, you know, provides the steps.
Yeah.
What if the steps aren't exactly in the direction that we think it's going to go? Then it's going to be really frustrating, and we have to learn to let that go. It's like live day to day, have hope for the future, but don't lock God in for it. Otherwise, you could have a beautiful life and it could be so good, but your expectations aren't met and you're just full of bitterness and disappointment. And yet you're being
Yeah.
robbed of a beautiful life because of that.
Yeah. Well, speaking of things not going the way you expected them to go, I didn't know this about you until I read your thing you came in. I need to know about this prank call that got you and Erica together, because I just lived under the assumption that you guys were like, high school sweethearts going all the way back to
Yeah.
like, I had this image of her like next to you in your bed at like the hospital and like this whole, so I need to hear this prank phone call.
Yeah, so she came in a little bit after all of that. So, you know, she was involved in that process. So I was, gosh, I was 14, almost 15. And I was going over to a friend's house for like a video game slumber party type thing, play games till 4 a.m. So I show up at my friend's house, and him and his friend, my friend as well. So all three of us are there, and they're already doing prank phone calls. And growing up with older siblings, you kind of have a reshape of like what you do as a teenager, right? Like I was raised within my own siblings as if they were parents by age gap. So like you kind of learn to grow up a little bit faster. Cancer kind of helps with that too.
On me, man.
You have like a new grounding of like, it's not worth the energy or effort. It's too much drama. I want less drama. So I saw prank phone calls as kind of rude and messed up of like, dude, you're probably ruining some family's dinner time. And you're probably going to cause a fight between the husband and the wife because you're trying to be funny. Not a good move.
Were they at least using the Arnold Schwarzenegger soundboards and all that stuff, or was it?
Yeah, it was just straight to the microphone.
Amateur hour, man.
So they were over there, and I was kind of just like relaxing and hanging out in the beanbags. I'm like, I'm not going to get involved in this. And so, they're like, well, we're going to prank call our friend. And I was like, okay, well, that's a different dynamic. That's more playful. It's less, you're ruining someone's life, possibly.
Cancer just made you extreme.
Yeah, it's black and white. So I saw them doing that, and I was like, okay, well, that's a little bit different. And so they were prank calling them, and I'm like, you guys suck at this. I'm like, they know who you are. They know your voices. You're not even trying to mask it. Star 86 or whatever still doesn't work. Like, they know it's you. I can hear them on the speakerphone saying, Morgan, Sal, we know it's you. Like, no, it's not. It's like, well, it doesn't sound like it's going very well. And so I was like, hey, guys, here's an idea. Let's plan this out. They don't know who I am. They've never heard my voice. They know you just prank phone called them. How about we give it 2 or 3 hours, come back in the evening, and I'll call them, and I'll pretend to be someone asking for someone on their end of the line, keep it short and simple. And they'll be like, okay, well, that's the wrong number. Simple as that. Hang up. A couple minutes later, do it again. And I'll just annoy them through persistence of ignorance, right? And they're like, this is the wrong number. And then I started getting frustrated of like, well, this is the number they gave me. I need to get a hold of them. And they were like, well, you have the wrong number. And they got really mad. And so then I really shut down. And so then they felt really bad about it because I was like kind of emotional on the phone because I sounded desperate to get a hold of someone.
Dark.
Don't play elementary. You got to plot these things out well. And so afterwards, all the back and forth, they called them. They're like, "Oh my gosh, it was you prank calling us." And it was all good. And after that, me and Erica started chatting through MySpace.
Person you were calling was Erica.
That was Erica. Yep. My friend Morgan and Sal were friends with Erica. I never, knew her. So that's how we connected. And then we started talking on MySpace. About 2 months later, we started dating. So at that point, I was 15. She was 13, turning 14. And yeah, so that was 2009 was when we started dating.
You guys were pushing 20, 26 years? No, sorry, 16 years. 16 years.
Yeah,
And you guys got married in what year?
2014. So right before we went up to ministry school, we got married summer and then moved that to September. The day before school registration. Well, no, it was the day of registration is when we moved up there.
Oh, wow.
And the next day was school. So we moved up there, got registered, unpacked the U-Haul, and then went to school.
Nothing like making multiple massive life changes on top of each other.
Yeah, and we still are as chaotic as ever. You know, it's like our work day will start 2 days after our move. All right, cool. We have 1 day to rest. We're fine.
And that's why you have to be on siege all the time to get a healthy way to get that chaotic energy out now, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I just lock in. For those of you that don't know, I play Rainbow Six Siege almost exclusively when I game. I've been playing with, Jay and our friends for quite a while when we started, but, I've fully committed to it. I'm a sweat. I'm a sweat for sure.
What's your rank right now?
So in Siege, I'll go backwards from highest rank on down. So in Siege, they have what's called champions, and you have your top 5,000, which is obviously skill ranked based on, who you play against and your wins and losses. So the top 5,000 get an actual number to their champion badge. And then below champion, you have diamond, and it's 1 through 5, your tier bracket. So, 1's the highest, 5's the lowest. Then it goes to emerald, plat, and I won't go down the rest because it's irrelevant right now. Because
it doesn't matter.
I'm not in those chump lobbies anymore. So I've just recently been averaging emerald 1, and of late I've hit diamond 5 twice. So diamond is the last tier before getting into champ. And if you were to compare how that stacks up globally, that's like in the top 50 to 60,000 players out of the 2.3 million per season on average that rank. So the game is fun, not as fun as it used to be when I was in lower lobbies, but it's like
I think the last time I played with you, I didn't want to play because I'm pretty sure you were pulling us into real sweaty lobbies.
Yeah, so when we played together, we would average like gold lobbies. We would rarely hit plat. Like plat was like, oh, we're in that tier. So gold was like, yeah, okay, we're sweating. But now I'm like 2-3 tiers above that now, and it's like I kind of feel bad because I can't play with people like I used to. Because they just get thrown lobbies where people are streaming and they're recording clips and they're getting paid for it. And I'm over here just like, well, I'm off of work, so I guess I'll play for an hour or two.
It's one of those real hard life lessons when you have to accept that you've outgrown your friends.
The joke with Siege is that, we say like, oh, so Diamond and Eberl is like, I have a full-time job and I'm good at this game lobbies. And then you have your high diamond champs where it's like, oh, I don't have a job. This is my job. Right. So that's kind of like how you tier bracket it.
Oh my gosh. Well, yeah, short story. Dennis is very good at Siege. Maybe when this finally goes up, we'll see if he wants to post his tag on there for anyone who wants to risk it for the biscuit, as they say, and some Siege with him.
I'm nice, I don't
know how much having a friend who can carry the other 4 of you.
Well, I've actually recently met this kid on Siege, which is kind of fun. He's like 19, so I'm like unk status to him.
How's that feel?
It's funny. I love it. I use it, right? Kind of honor. There's a level of respect in comedy humor that you can kind of pull off. You can leverage it. If you play into it, you can leverage impact. I don't get so reactive to them all the time. Kind of play around with them. So this kid I met through another guy I was playing with for a while. His friend was really good, kind of in the same, a little bit higher than how I would play. So he was really good, somewhat of a carry for me. And another friend of his. So we play together a lot. His gamer tag was a Squirt. So just a fun little nickname like Squirt. That's what we called him. So he was terrible, I'll say. He was bad. In Siege, if you're not having like a 0.8 KD, you're not doing well. And he had like a 0.6, 0.5, right? So he would die, every 2 or 3 deaths, he would get a kill. And it's like, when it's 5v5, every kill matters.
Yeah.
Don't even fight, just survive. Strength in numbers.
Somewhere, dude.
Just
Just hide
hide.
in the corner.
Scare the team to thinking you're somewhere, even if you're under. So this kid was bad, but I felt bad because his friends would just talk so negatively to him, dude. Like they would insult him and stuff, and he'd make mistakes, and they wouldn't even help him or give him tips. They would just like, "You suck. You're trash. Get off this." And I'm like, "These are your friends, dude." And so, I would talk to him like, "Hey, listen, okay, now that you died, watch the kill cam. What happened? Learn the map. Learn the space. Here's some strats. Stay with me."
Like a true unk.
Yeah, so I was kind of like coaching him through this game, and he's a good kid, good head on his shoulders, super kind, and you could sometimes kind of feed and read people just on how they communicate. Like, this is just a good kid. And he would even tell them, I know I suck at this game, guys, but I'm only playing it because you guys play it, and I want to play with you guys. Like, otherwise I wouldn't play it. And as like an older brother, I'm like, oh, I know how that feels. Playing Halo with my older brothers, right?
Yeah.
You love to get good. And so I kind of took him under my wing. I'm like, all right, here, let me show you some strats. Let me show you some ways to play. Here's where you're doing wrong. And like kind of coached him through it. And I got to a point where I told him, listen, I'm done playing with your friends. They're just rude. They're not worth my time. I'm too old for this drama. If you're online, let me know and we'll play together. I'm not playing with them because they're not worth my right. And I would even tell them in the chat, I'm like, listen, guys, like I'm too old for this. You either cut it out or I'm leaving because I don't know you. I don't have any stake in the game. So you either rise to the occasion of who I'm calling you to be or I'm out because this kid doesn't deserve it. Right. And so it's been like 4 or 5 months now. I've been playing with this kid and he's like a heck of a lot better and he's fun to play with. But, video games don't have to be just mindless gaming.
You can make real connections on there.
Yeah, like I'm almost like mentoring, coaching this kid. He's got like a girlfriend now, and I'm kind of walking him through how to,
That's
cook.
the real win right there. That's
Like
the real win.
I even showed him how to microwave ramen because he didn't know how. I'm like, buddy, water, seasoning, and egg if you're getting fancy.
Yeah.
2 minutes.
We're just gonna tie this all in. This is all again. This is that little bit of faithfulness. Look what the wisdom that you got that you're passing on to the next generation through Siege.
Now he can cook up a pretty decent meal for his girlfriend.
I mean, but the reality of that is though, right, is like if you're living wholeheartedly and you've accepted who you are and you are allowing your story be something that gives to others, then wherever your community is, whether it's at work, it's at home, it's at church, it's online, right? If you allow it, your job is you're just throwing seeds and you never know what can happen with that. So a 19-year-old kid whose buddies are being jerks to him, but you get to encounter him, you're going to get a little bit of what you walked through and can actually get something beyond just a video game, that you can use something tangible in life. So that's profound.
Yeah, it's fun. A couple of these kids, they know my story. I'm transparent. I'm open. They know whole cancer card, for lack of a better word. They know like, parental loss and stuff through my story. So it's cool being available to people in a place where they go to escape. Right.
Yeah.
Because sometimes video games aren't a way to actually relax. It's a way to escape. I've done it. And so to know that you can still be a source for someone, even if it takes 6-7 months down the road of playing with them, because they're just strangers. And then over time, an opportunity appears. It's worth it. It's an unexpected gift, I would say, to be a source of help to someone that you don't know what their story is. You don't know where they're at, but you've gone through something that can help them feel less alone, right? And that's the end. It's just about not being alone. And that's the gospel. Like, you're not alone. You can't find Jesus in your life, then at least the people who are being Jesus and being called to be like Jesus can at least be the bridge until they can have that personal relationship. Because at the end of the day, that's all. It's as simple as that. Just be available and love people.
Well, on that note, man, we're going to have to do a follow-up because we didn't even get to touch on a ton of stuff that I know would be really significant for folks. But why don't we just leave off with, is there one thing you would want to say to someone out there, looking at life, and again, how we are approaching this from the sense of life is sacred and life is strange. There's a lot of stuff that happens in the middle. Is there something you would want to say to anyone out there who's maybe wrestling in that tension to just help them keep moving forward?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say there's nothing wrong with really who you are or how you're asking questions, right? Like we're all made in a unique way that's part of the makeup and who God's made us to be. But the key is to give space for God to be with you in it. And
Yeah.
a lot, what I mean by that is sometimes we ask questions and we feel like it's wrong to ask it. But if we go deeper behind that question, the way we're seeing life to have that question be inspired is a specific way God made us to observe things or be a gift to the world through Him. Like if you are very rational and very logical, like there's nothing wrong with you having questions in that space.
Mm-hmm.
But know that like that's part of how God made you because that's part of God. And you can actually celebrate and bask in that unique identifier that you have something to offer the world, that there's a gap that you can fill. And I think we get so hung up on seeing gaps, we don't realize we're actually the piece that fills it. Maybe that's like the more refined version, is that instead of looking at gaps in the world, see how you are made to fill gaps. Like, what are your strengths and gifts? You're not different, you're actually needed. You're not strange, you're actually part of a bigger picture. And so the world needs you, right? You're needed. And we're all unique, and that's why we need each other, right? Like we're not meant to be alone, and you're not meant to feel alone. It's just that there's a need out there that you're meant to fill. And so if the space you're in doesn't welcome you, then it's not the right space. There's nothing wrong with you, but there's holes meant to be filled, and you are that piece for it.
Yeah. Well, thanks for jumping in. Love your story. We're going to definitely have to have a part 2. There's still a ton there, but thanks for jumping in and thanks for sharing all the sacred and strange and everything in between in your life.
Well, I appreciate you having me. We got through 16 years, about halfway there. 20s are a doozy, I'll say. Things are pretty kosher between 16 and 18.
Yeah.
At least this period. But I appreciate you, love you, and thanks for having me. Enjoy the talk, and yeah, looking forward to part 2, and hopefully not a part 3, but who knows?
I mean, we can have as many parts as we need. Let's close this one out, and we'll get something figured out for next time.
Love you, Jay.
Love you, man.